Clarall Touch of Yogurt Shampoo, 1980s. In the 1980s, Clarall released Touch of Yogurt Shampoo, promising soft, luxurious hair with the power of dairy. Only problem was it was too confusing. Many thought it was edible, and let's just say ingesting shampoo is more dangerous than you can imagine. Others just couldn't get behind the idea of washing their hair with something they usually paired with granola, so clearly the idea flopped, and it had to be taken off the shelves. But this next item would take you for a ride. The Sinclair C5. The Sinclair C5 was supposed to be the next big thing in personal transportation. An affordable, eco-friendly electric trike designed by British inventor Clive Sinclair. But in reality, it was slow with a top speed of 15 miles per hour, unsafe, and just plain goofy looking. The world wasn't ready for a flimsy, battery-powered death trap. Sales tanked, and the C5 quickly went down as one of the worst vehicle flops ever. But even this one was not as rejected as this next item. Colgate Frozen Dinners, 1982. In one of the most baffling marketing decisions of the 1980s, Colgate, the toothpaste company, decided to jump into the frozen food business. Because nothing says delicious meal like a brand best known for fighting plaque. Predictably, consumers took one look at Colgate's frozen entrees and completely rejected it. The association with minty fresh toothpaste was just too strong, and people weren't exactly eager to dig into a lasagna brought to them by the same company that made their mouth wash. The line flopped so hard that Colgate pretends it never happened. The lesson here is clear. Just because you can expand your brand doesn't mean you should. And speaking of expanding brands, this next item was an even worse flop. The Cosmopolitan Yogurt, 1980s. Cosmopolitan magazine had a simple idea. Women love yogurt. Women love Cosmo. So why not combine the two and create Cosmopolitan Yogurt? Sounds like flawless logic, right? Wrong. The product hit store shelves with no clear reason for existing, and consumers weren't buying the idea or the yogurt. To make things worse, there was zero connection between a fashion and lifestyle magazine and a refrigerated snack. It was like Vogue launching a line of frozen burritos. The yogurt was pulled from stores faster than a bad Tinder date, and Cosmo quietly pretended it never happened. Let's move on to another great brand that had another failed idea. The Silo Home Computer, 1980s. Back in the 80s, everyone wanted in on the home computer boom. Even Silo, a company best known for selling appliances and cheap furniture. That's right, the same place where you'd buy a discount couch thought they could take on IBM and Apple. Spoiler alert, they could not. The Silo Home Computer was clunky, underpowered, and about as useful as a fridge without a door. It had no real innovation and limited software. Customers were skeptical, and rightfully so. Predictably, the Silo PC flopped harder than a bad sitcom pilot. People stuck with the brands that actually knew what they were doing, and Silo quietly went back to selling microwaves. This next one will twist your nose the wrong way. Yoan Musk for men car fresheners, 1980s. Yoan Musk was a popular men's cologne brand in the 80s, known for its bold, musky scent. So, in a stroke of absolute marketing genius, sarcasm alert, someone thought, why stop at people? Let's make cars smell like this too. Enter Yoan Musk car fresheners, a product nobody asked for. The problem was instead of that luxurious, masculine aroma they promised, it basically turned your car into a perfume factory on steroids. People complained the scent was too strong, too overwhelming, and in some cases, gave them headaches. Plus, if you already wore Yoan Musk cologne, your car and your body ended up in a battle of dueling scents. Unsurprisingly, the product bombed. Drivers didn't want their cars smelling like a leather jacket at a high school dance, and Yoan quickly yanked it from the market. But here's another item that's completely forgotten. Docari Dispatch Rider, 1980s. Designed for couriers and delivery workers, it was supposed to be the ultimate city riding machine. Compact, efficient, and easy to handle. But in reality, it was underpowered, unstable, and looked ridiculous. Couriers hated it. It lacked speed, had terrible handling, and wasn't built for real-world delivery work. Meanwhile, regular consumers took one look at its oddball design and said, "Nah, I'll walk." Sales sputtered, and the Docari Dispatch Rider vanished into the abyss of forgotten vehicle flops. Speaking of vehicle flops, you might want to check this next one out. The Isuzu Impulse talking car, 1983 to 1989. In the 1980s, car companies were obsessed with making vehicles talk because apparently people wanted their cars to nag them like a robotic backseat driver. Enter the Isuzu Impulse, a sleek little sport car that had one big gimmick: it talked. And not in a cool Knight Rider way. No, this thing wouldn't shut up. The Impulse came equipped with a digital voice system that constantly reminded drivers about everything. Doors ajar, fuel levels, seat belts, even maintenance checks. It was less like driving a high-tech car and more like being scolded by a passive-aggressive robot. Worse, the voice system wasn't exactly soothing. It sounded cold and unnatural. Unsurprisingly, drivers got sick of their car acting like their mother, and Isuzu eventually scrapped the whole talking car idea. Turns out, people don't want their own vehicle telling them how to live their life. Moving on, this next item was another sad flop. Max Headroom merchandise, 1980s. If you were alive in the 80s, you probably remember Max Headroom, the weird, glitchy, wisecracking computer-generated TV host. He was everywhere: commercials, music videos, talk shows, but someone, somewhere, made a huge mistake. They thought Max Headroom was popular enough to sell merchandise. Sadly, he wasn't. Max Headroom got slapped on lunchboxes, action figures, t-shirts, posters, and even cola. But here's the problem. He was a novelty, not an actual character kids wanted to play with. By the late 80s, people were over Max Headroom, and all that merch just sat on store shelves collecting dust. The character faded into obscurity, and the leftover Max Headroom lunchboxes became garage sale regulars. This next brand had one job: McDonald's MCDLT, 1984 to 1991. McDonald's had one job: make burgers simple. But in the 80s, they decided to get fancy with the MCDLT, a burger that came in a weird two-compartment styrofoam container. One side held the hot beef patty, while the other side had the cold lettuce, tomato, and mayo. The idea was that you'd put them together yourself, keeping the hot side hot and the cool side cool. Sounds neat in theory, but nobody wanted to do extra work for a burger. This was fast food, not a DIY project. And let's not forget the massive styrofoam container, which was awful for the environment. By the late 80s, environmental concerns were a big deal, and McDonald's was under pressure to cut back on waste. The MCDLT quietly disappeared in 1991, and nobody really missed it. However, nothing quite missed the mark like this next one. The Reebok Pump sneakers, 1989. In theory, the Reebok Pump was supposed to be the coolest sneaker of the late 80s. It had a little inflatable bladder in the tongue that you could literally pump up for a custom fit. The marketing made it seem like these shoes would turn you into an instant basketball legend, and for a hot second, people actually believed it. But here's the thing, they didn't really do much. The pump feature was more of a gimmick than a game changer, and the shoes were crazy expensive, around $170 back then, which was outrageous. Plus, they were heavy and clunky compared to other basketball shoes. Once the novelty wore off, people realized they just paid extra for a tiny air bubble that made no real difference. By the early 90s, sneakerheads had moved on, and the Reebok Pump deflated into history. Same history also swallowed this next idea. New Coke, 1985. In 1985, Coca-Cola did something no one asked for. They changed the recipe of their beloved soda. Why? Because Pepsi was gaining popularity and Coke executives panicked. Their brilliant idea? Make Coke taste more like Pepsi. Bad move. People lost their minds. Loyal Coke drinkers hated the new, sweeter formula and demanded the original back. Some even hoarded old cans of Coke like it was the apocalypse. The backlash was so intense that within just 79 days, Coca-Cola was forced to bring back the original recipe, rebranded as Coca-Cola Classic. This is proof that big brands make mistakes too, just like Apple. The Apple Lisa, 1983. Apple is known for sleek, innovative products, but back in the 80s, they made one of the biggest flops in computer history, the Apple Lisa. Lisa was ahead of its time in some ways. It had one of the first graphical user interfaces, a mouse, and other fancy features. But there was one huge problem: the price. This thing cost $10,000 in 1983, about $30,000 in today's money. That's right, Apple expected people to drop car-level cash on a computer. Spoiler alert, they didn't. To make things worse, Lisa was slow and buggy, and by the time Apple launched the much cheaper and better Macintosh in 1984, Lisa was already dead in the water. Apple ended up burying the unsold models, literally. They dumped them in a landfill in Utah. The Delorean DMC-12, 1981 to 1983. The Delorean DMC-12 is one of the most iconic cars of the 80s, but not because it was a good car. It became legendary thanks to Back to the Future, but in reality, this thing was a disaster on wheels. First off, it was ridiculously underpowered. It looked like a high-performance sports car, but with a sluggish 130 horsepower engine, it had about as much speed as a grocery cart with a bad wheel. Then there was the price, a whopping $25,000, about $80,000 today, which was way too much for what you got. But the biggest problem? John DeLorean himself. The company was struggling financially, and in a desperate attempt to save it, DeLorean got caught in an FBI sting operation involving drug trafficking. Yep, the founder was accused of trying to finance his company with cocaine money. Though he was acquitted, the damage was done. The company collapsed in 1983, and the DeLorean became more of a Hollywood prop than an actual car success. The Nintendo Power Glove, 1989. Marketed as the future of gaming, the Power Glove was supposed to let players control their games with hand gestures, like some kind of high-tech wizard. The ads made it look mind-blowing. The reality? It barely worked. The motion controls were wildly inaccurate, the setup was a nightmare, and most games weren't even designed for it. Trying to use it felt less like gaming and more like performing bad sign language at your TV. The only real success it had was looking awesome in the 1989 movie The Wizard, where a kid famously declares, "I love the Power Glove, it's so bad." Unfortunately, he wasn't wrong. The Power Glove was bad, and Nintendo quietly pulled the plug after it flopped. The scented Barbie, 1980s. Mattel thought they had a brilliant idea in the 80s. Why not make Barbie smell good? Enter the perfume Pretty Barbie and Strawberry Scented Barbie, designed to give off sweet, fruity aromas like vanilla and strawberries. Sounds fun, right? Not so much. The problem? Artificial fragrances don't last forever, and over time, these dolls' sweet scents turned into something far less pleasant. Some collectors today say their dolls ended up smelling like rancid fruit, moldy candy, or straight-up chemicals. Imagine finding your childhood Barbie in storage years later, only to be greeted by a scent that's more expired yogurt than fresh strawberries. It didn't help that the scent was embedded in the plastic itself. So even if you wanted to get rid of the smell, there wasn't much you could do. While scented dolls still exist today, companies have figured out better ways to make the fragrance last. Pepsi AM, 1989. Pepsi took a bold and bizarre gamble in 1989. They figured, hey, people love caffeine in the morning. Why not give them soda instead of coffee? And just like that, Pepsi AM was born. This wasn't just regular Pepsi. It had 25% more caffeine, and the ads pushed it as the ultimate morning wake-up drink. The problem? Nobody asked for this. Most coffee drinkers were not about to swap their morning cup for a sugary soda, and those who already drank Pepsi in the morning didn't see the point of buying a separate version. Worse, it still had all the sugar of regular Pepsi, making it a terrible choice for a wake-up boost that didn't lead to a crash. Pepsi AM flopped fast and was pulled from shelves within a year. Pepsi never tried a breakfast soda again, probably for the best. Kodak Discamera, 1982 to 1989. In the early 80s, Kodak thought they had the next big thing in photography, the Kodak Discamera. Instead of using traditional 35mm film, it used thin, circular discs with tiny negatives. It was sleek, futuristic looking, and designed to be ultra-convenient. Just pop in a disc, take your photos, and get them developed. There was just one little problem. The photos were awful. The negatives on the disc were absurdly small, about 8 by 10 millimeters, meaning that even under the best conditions, images turned out grainy, blurry, and lacking detail. Try blowing up a picture, and you'd get something that looked like a bad watercolor painting. At first, People were excited about the compact design, but once they saw their disappointing prints, they quickly ditched the format. Meanwhile, 35mm film still dominated because it actually produced good photos. By the late 80s, Kodak quietly pulled the plug on disc cameras. Rejuvenique face mask, late 80s, early 90s. The mask itself looked like something out of a slasher film. A creepy, expressionless, hard plastic face with electrodes positioned all over it. Users were supposed to wear it while it zapped their facial muscles to give them a more youthful look. The problem? It hurt. People described the sensation as anything from a mild tingling to straight-up electrocution, and the experience was anything but relaxing. Instead of feeling younger, users mostly felt like they were being mildly tortured. Not surprisingly, it didn't last long on the market. Today, Rejuvenique is mostly remembered as one of the creepiest beauty products ever made. And if you ever see one in a thrift shop, it's more likely to be in the horror mask section than the beauty aisle. The QCAT, inspired by 1980. Released in the late 90s, but based on 80s era tech ideas, the QCAT was a barcode scanner for personal computers. The idea was simple. Instead of typing in a website URL from an ad or a magazine, you could scan a special barcode next to it, and your computer would take you straight to the page. Sounds cool, right? Wrong. Here's the problem. Typing a web address was already easy. No one was struggling to type www.pepsi.com. Plus, the QCAT required users to plug in a bulky, cat-shaped scanner just to do something they could already do in seconds. It was like inventing an electric spoon, unnecessary and overly complicated. To make things worse, QCAT tracked user data, sparking privacy concerns before that was even a mainstream issue.